Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is February 26th, and here we go, straight into the book of Numbers. The name of the lesson today is counting. So we are in Numbers chapter 1, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 4. It says, a year after Israel's departure from Egypt, the Lord spoke to Moses in the tabernacle in the wilderness of Sinai. On the first day of the second month of that year, he said, from the whole community of Israel, record the names, of all the warriors by their clans and families. List all the men 20 years old or older who are able to go to war. You and Aaron must register the troops, and you will be assisted by one family leader from each tribe. Okay. The book of Numbers is about bridging between Egypt and the Promised Land, if you think of that. And so the book of Numbers itself, the actual Hebrew word is Bamidbar. It's the fourth book of the Torah, and its English is called Numbers because it records the counting of the people in the wilderness, of the Israelites. So this is the first time they're counted after they've left Egypt. And so you see, and what is recorded here are everyone age 20 and above. And there's a few reasons for that. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And if you look, it begins right away. You walk straight into the book of Numbers with a list of numbers. So it sort of makes sense to you that that's what it's called, Numbers. And it's also the book of the wilderness wanderings. It is, and we'll get more into that. Oh, I think that's next week that we'll talk about that. So why is it that Moses wants to count the people? And in verse 2 and 3, it talks about all of these details. So what is now? It is it's the first time in the book of Numbers that the people are counted, but it's not the first time in Scripture that God counts his people. You actually, in the Old Testament, Israel is counted 10 times. The first time is when Jacob went down to Egypt. Remember, we talked about the 70 there. And then when God brought them out of Egypt in Exodus chapter 12, verse 37, after the golden calf and the whole Levite going through the camps. And that's in Exodus. And then right here is to count them, to arrange them around the tabernacle. I'm pretty sure I talked about the beginning of the book of Numbers in last year's lesson on this day. So if you jump back to February the 26th on 2024, I taught this day, and I'm pretty sure I talked about overview of the book of Numbers on that day. I'm going to get, see if I can get Linda to link this. Some of y'all are really good at finding these things. But on February 28th, of probably one of my favorite lessons I've ever taught, in 2021, I taught about the arrangement of the tribes around the tabernacle, which is one of the best. I love that lesson. And I just don't have that day this year. So, or we would be talking about it, but I don't have that day to teach. So if you want to see that lesson, I will get Linda to link it in right here. But, cause she really likes me to let her know that I reference a lesson, cause everybody starts emailing and saying, where's that lesson that Lisa said? So I'll find it for you and we'll get it linked in. And then at the end of the book of of Numbers, before we go into the Promised Land, there's another counting. And then you will see, once we're in, spoiler for the rest of the Old Testament, when you get into the land and once we're into the monarchy, you'll see that Saul counted twice. And then you'll see that this is like, so when we say, isn't taking a census a bad thing? God commands this one. There's another time that you may be thinking of that David takes a census, and he is punished for it because of his reasoning behind taking it. And that's through he commands Joab to take a census, and God's like, no, David. And so, and then, really big spoiler, after we're sent into exile and then brought back, Ezra in the book of Ezra will count those who have returned from Babylon. And then actually God will take a census that in the future, and he references that in Jeremiah 33. And so the only time that a census results in punishment is David's in 2 Samuel, and we will talk about that when we get there. But this whole idea of a census, and what's the reasoning behind taking a census? Okay. Number one, to elevate the Jewish people in sort of meaning they need to know the strength in their numbers. They need to know that. And so, and their arrangement around the tabernacle. So the tabernacle had been completed a month before this census. And so they are being arranged around the tabernacle based on their number. How many's in there? Because God has a really big plan. Remember that whole foreshadowing, foretell, all of that? It's exactly what he's doing right here. Just wait. It is amazing what God's doing. So, you'll see that. So the second reason that God's commanding a census here is he explains that straight to them. To determine the family and tribe. The word clan means the tribe there. And of each person. Because God showed the other nations, remember, other nations around, God's in the meaning, that his people may know, but that the others may know that he is God. So God's counting of the tribes and the families is showing the other nation that the Jewish people are special. That they can trace their lineage. And they are chosen by him because to this day, until they get into the land and there becomes a problem, they have maintained clan purity through marriage. So it's an amazing thing. And you'll actually see that a lot that talks about in the book of Numbers. But it's one of the things that will cause them problem later down the road is they start intermarrying with all the ites that they were not supposed to. That's not happened at this point. And we see that. And so what you see is you are doing an accurate account of the number who had come out of Egypt, because the division of the land of Israel was based on this census. Even though this is not the generation, spoiler, that will enter the land, the next generation is treated as their heirs. And so the land will be divided up based on these numbers. And then, I think I said 3, I meant there's 4. And another, exactly what he said, over the age of 20. They were putting them in order as a fighting force. In verse 3, it really says that. The plan is they're going to be entering the land that will be Israel, and they're going to require an army. And we will talk a lot about this. This is probably one of the top questions I get. I'm discussing just war with my ethics class right now. And the discussion of, and we talk a lot about here, what's going on in Numbers and what goes on actually in Joshua and in Judges. And so I want us to look at God's doing this for a purpose. I think he really wants to see them to see how small their numbers really are. Because it is not by might, nor is it by numbers that these people will take that land. But it is because of who their God is that they will take their land, because it has been given to them. It is a set deal. And we're going to see that they don't believe that. And they're going to deal with a whole lot of 40 years worth. They don't believe. And so we're going to walk through the book of Numbers together as we look at all of that. But that's the importance of this census. And that's exactly why the book of Numbers is called Numbers. Because it starts with a list of numbers and it ends with a list of numbers. Very simple. But that's what it's about. And I did a Facebook Live the other day. And I said the very thing that what the book of Numbers is. Exodus explains to us how God took a people out of Egypt. The book of Numbers explains how God takes Egypt out of the people, because that's really what we're dealing with. So we'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.